Welcome everybody to this week's webinar. I'm delighted to be joined by Greg Savage. Greg is a legend in the recruitment space. He's been working in the industry for a very long time, having started his own company at the tender age of 27, I believe, brought it up to be a massive company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. He then became involved in Recruitment and led it through dramatic growth. The Recruitment was involved in management buyout. He owned Firebrand Talent, which was sold earlier on this year. But everybody watching this will really know you from your blog, The Savage Truth, which is a voice of authority within the recruitment industry, and everybody reads it. So I'm absolutely delighted. Greg, welcome to my webinar.
Shane, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show, and I do find it most amusing and that you call me a legend 3 times so far, which is hilarious, particularly as I'm sitting at home doing this, and there is no one in the vicinity of where I am now who considers me to be a legend. I can assure you of that.
You're never a legend in your own home. Everybody knows that, Greg. Well, today we're going to be talking about all sorts of interesting things. I build this. We're going to talk a little bit about, well, the future of recruitment is what we're going to talk about. I'd like to try and get your thoughts on where we are, where we're going, and also, more importantly, what we can do about it to try and take advantage of the opportunities that are there. So, first, obvious and simple question with a complicated answer. Why, Greg, is recruitment so difficult?
Well, it is a simple question, and a bit like recruitment itself, Shane, where people think it's simple. It is indeed not simple at all. I'm often amused when people say to me, and I'm sure they've said it to you, recruitment's not rocket science. And of course, it's not rocket science. It is not intellectually demanding to understand what it is we do in this job. But it is an extremely difficult job to do. And there's a number of reasons for it. In fact, I think one of the reasons so many people fail in recruitment is that they fail to understand how challenging it is. I often hear recruiters saying it's an easy job and it's not complex. In fact, it is. One of the things that makes it so difficult, Shane, that most people don't get is that this is the only job where the product you're selling can actually say no. And what I mean by that is, I decide I'm going to sell you my car. Shane, you agree to buy it. We agree on a price. I agree to sell it. You agree to buy it. And the car does not turn around and say, no, I'm not going with Shane. I don't like his accent. That is what happens to us. We can do a job brilliantly, take a great job description, manage the process, identify the talent, manage counter offers and all sorts of things, bring it to conclusion, and at the last minute the candidate can say, no, I'm not going. And that makes this job very different and very frustrating for a lot of people. A lot of other reasons why it's so tricky is that, of course, this is an all-or-nothing job. We all know that. It's not like the Olympics where you can earn an honourable silver, come second or third, and still, be rewarded, or be an accountant who does a good job as opposed to a great job. We either fill the job or we don't. That's what leads to burnout in our industry. So many people get exhausted by doing so much work that they don't get paid for. So one of the things about our industry that is farcical, I think, it's worth saying, I suppose, it's so common to us that we don't even think about it anymore, although I do, and that is that the model of our industry, upon which, the whole premise upon which it exists, is in fact, it's broken. I mean, what I mean by that is that most of us in our industry, most people listening to this webinar will work on contingent permanent placements, and they'll work in competition. And that is ludicrous. I mean, you don't go to your accountant with a box of tax returns and receipts and say, do my tax return, but I'm going to go to 4 other accountants as well, and the one who does it the quickest I'm going to pay. We don't do that. We wouldn't think of doing that. And yet we as an industry accept that. And that makes it an incredibly difficult job to do well, because what it requires us to do in many cases is to compete on the basis of speed, not price, not quality, I should say. Definitely not price, I hope, but to compete on the basis of speed or price instead of quality and good process. And that means that we are, even if we go into the exercise meaning to do great work, we are compelled to take shortcuts. And that makes it an incredibly difficult job. These days, in the modern era, it's more so because now our clients, Shane, they understand everything. There is no smoke and mirrors in our industry anymore. You know, we used to be able to go to clients and say, I've got this great database, you need to hire me so that I can provide you great candidates. That is no longer, that's not believed by clients anymore. They have seen through all of that. They know they've got bigger and more powerful databases that they can go to, like LinkedIn and others. They don't believe they can scrutinize our process. It's transparent. And that means that only the recruiters who can provide real value and can differentiate will survive. And that makes it increasingly difficult, as does the fact that, you know, frankly, I think of it this way. For most of my recruitment career, the client and the recruiter have been allies. They've worked together. The client has hired the recruiter and said, help me find the best talent. And they've collaborated. These days, I think clients are actually competitors of ours. They're actually setting up, as we all know, internal teams. They're paying people bonuses to cut down on our fees. They're looking at any other tactics that they can to exclude us from the process. And so recruitment is an exceptionally difficult job. It takes, these days, sorry Shane, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just fascinated in what you're saying. Do you think then the recruitment, obviously the recruitment landscape has changed, and do you think recruitment is now becoming more difficult than it was? I think
absolutely. Absolutely. You used to, you know, the recruitment's gone through eras, but you used to be able to, in not too distant past, there are plenty of recruiters who made a good living out of just being resume shufflers, electronic resume shufflers. And they could match a job description to a candidate's profile. But frankly, I've got a 12-year-old son 2 bedrooms away, and he could do that. And he could use the computer better than most people my age or 20 years younger for that matter. Those days have gone. Recruitment now is far more complex because you need to be very strong in the use of technology, and by that I mean e-sourcing and understanding how to identify talent. Very strong in the use of subtle online branding through social media, but you also need, and I'll come to this later when we get through some of your later questions, I think, you also need to have highly refined skills in the craft of recruitment, the ability to manage the process. And all those skills, I mean, most recruiters don't have the technology skills, and a lot of even the good ones lost the craft of recruitment in the hurly-burly of pushing resumes around in the boom where you could make money by just emailing resumes around. Those days have gone. Long gone.
Greg, tell me what you mean by the craft of recruitment, because that's not a term I've heard anybody other than you use.
You see, I think that, jumping ahead in our conversation, I think that the future of recruitment is where sophisticated use of technology combines with highly skilled human interaction. Now, those two things don't always go hand in hand, but I believe that's the future of recruitment. I actually don't believe that recruitment will become totally technology-driven. There are plenty of people who've tried that. It will never happen. Nor do I believe you can recruit 1999 style, where it was all on relationships and who I knew, and my network was the only thing that counted, and I would last forever by sending my resumes around on a motorbike in hard copy. That's not going to work anymore either. So the craft of recruitment is the influencing skills, the persuading skills, the negotiating skills, the finessing skills, the ability to manage the process. And so few recruiters have that. And I'm talking about, Shane, old school skills that need to be reinvented. You know, even taking a job description, managing the candidate through the process, dealing with counteroffers, all those things I consider, and many, many more, to be the craft of recruitment. And so few recruiters these days. I mean, I spend a lot of time traveling around, as you know. I've managed businesses all over the place. I see a lot of recruiters in action, and I'm stunned at the lack of finesse that they show in the craft of managing this process. And it's that influencing skill that I think clients will pay us for 2 things, in my view. One is they'll pay, and this is the most compelling thing, they'll pay us to find talent that they can't find themselves. Second thing is, finding talent is only half the battle. Getting them to the hiring table to a point where they will entertain an offer and accept an offer takes human skills, not technology. And so that's the blend that great recruiters will have, Shane, in the future.
Well, tell me more about the future, Greg, because a lot of the stuff I do, and I'm sort of associated with technology and recruitment, And a lot of people would accuse me of thinking that technology is going to take over, which I absolutely disagree with. Technology will not. Technology will never replace the craft of recruitment that you're talking about, nor should it even attempt to. But I mean, if you have a crystal ball, where do you think the industry is going to go to in the future?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and maybe it's because I say a lot about it that people are somehow fooled into thinking I have some crystal ball. Of course, I don't. You know, it's like asking the meaning of life. I don't actually know the answer to it, but I do take up your point about technology. I mean, I think technology changes the mode of the interaction, but it doesn't change the need for the influencing skills. We'll come back to that. You asked about the future of recruitment. Well, I think to understand that, you have to first of all understand that our customers, and in this particular case, I'm talking about clients. I consider candidates to be customers too, and I'll come back to them. But our customers, in terms of clients, are thinking differently to any time in the 30 years I've been in this industry. They are thinking completely differently. Some of the things that I find and I know this because I did 100 client visits last year, and I asked them what they're thinking. And one of the things they're thinking is that our industry is redundant. Largely, they think that they are cynical, I'm afraid to say. They've always criticized our industry, but now they're cynical about our ability to deliver something they can't deliver themselves. That is both a problem but an opportunity, because if we can be recruiters who can prove through differentiation that we can offer them something they can't get themselves, they'll pay us well for it. So there still is an industry ahead of us, I believe. But clients are cynical. They are building massive resources to bypass third-party recruiters like ourselves, or like myself. And they no longer see recruitment as a screening process. This is very important to understand. There are a lot of recruiters out there. I've just been to South Africa where there's a lot of challenges there, as there are in other parts of the world in our industry. But in many cases there, as in Australia in some cases, recruiters think their job is to screen and provide the client a shortlist. Yeah, of course they want us to do that, but they won't pay us for that. They will pay us to identify talent they can't find themselves and bring them to the table. And so that is something that we've got to understand. I'd ask you to imagine a world, and I'd ask everyone on this call to just think about this world, which is not so far-fetched. Imagine a world where job boards become totally ineffective. I believe that world is fast upon us. Yesterday, I noticed in Australia that the second biggest job board has just decided that they will no longer charge for putting ads on their website because they don't believe the model exists anymore. Can you believe that? So imagine a world where job boards don't work, and they will not work because A, they only tap into active candidates, and B, the types of candidates that clients are going to pay us to find are going to be candidates with skills that are very, very rare, and they're not going to be going to job boards. So imagine a world where job boards don't work. Okay, put a cross next to that. Then imagine a world where LinkedIn becomes less effective. Now, LinkedIn is a brilliant invention. Every recruiter should use it, and we should milk it for as much as we can. And you should become sophisticated in the ability to search LinkedIn and find the jewels in the crown that exist on that database. But I'll say this slowly. LinkedIn, and I'm speaking to recruiters, LinkedIn is not your friend. Hear me on this. LinkedIn is not your friend. LinkedIn does not care about recruiters. LinkedIn cares about the corporates. That is going to be their ultimate market. How do I know? I don't know. That's what I believe. Have they told me that? Absolutely not. But to me, it's absolutely obvious that if I owned LinkedIn, 90% of placement in this world are made direct. So I would use recruiters to build my business as they are. And then once I had a tipping point of enough talent on my database, why wouldn't LinkedIn, think about this, Shane, why wouldn't LinkedIn go to Amazon or Microsoft or some medium-sized company and say, we've got the biggest database of candidates in the world and we've just banned recruiters, third-party recruiters from using it? Why wouldn't they do that? It would be a compelling sales proposition. And so what I'm saying in my crystal ball is imagine a world where there's no job boards, or they don't work very well. Imagine a world where you're either banned from LinkedIn or it becomes ineffective, which I believe it will do anyway because people are getting fatigued from being headhunted on LinkedIn. All the best candidates are taking their keywords out of their profiles because they're getting, I believe in the US, up to 40 approaches a day from headhunters. So it's going to become less effective. So now you're not going to get candidates from job boards, Shane. You're not going to get candidates from LinkedIn. And you don't have a compelling social media offering because 95% of recruiters don't. If you consider that world, what are you going to go to clients with and say, please pay me 25% for candidates? Clients are going to say, I can put an ad on a job board and that's hopeless. I can go to LinkedIn and you can't. Or at best, I can go to LinkedIn same as you. Now, I've got a more compelling social media strategy than you have, which most, not most, but which many corporates have. What are we as an industry going to offer? So the future of recruitment is this. The future of recruitment is that everything, Shane, that is scary about recruitment in the future is about candidates, not about clients, in my opinion. Of course we need to love our clients. Of course we need to nurture our clients. I'll just finish this thought and they'll throw it to you. But clients will come if we've got candidates they can't get themselves. So that, in a nutshell, is where the future of recruitment lies, in my view.
Okay, you're throwing questions at me, Greg. I'm not too sure that's really how it's supposed to work. So in summary then, the recruitment industry as we know and love it at this moment in time is fundamentally broken. That recruitment is difficult and it's getting more and more difficult. That LinkedIn doesn't like third-party recruiters. All this stuff, it's almost as if I'm talking to myself, Greg, because I've spoken about this at length at various times. It sounds as though then that the agency recruitment market needs to reinvent itself. It needs to come up with value propositions to its clients that's currently not really being offered by in the way that the clients need it. I've always said that there was a gap within the industry that the clients and indeed candidates don't really respect recruiters as the professionals which they are. And there's something going on there. So do you see the market then moving much more niche than generalist? Do you see it being a smaller industry going forward?
I think, despite everything I've said, I'm tremendously optimistic about the industry, and I intend to be involved in it going forward. I don't think the industry itself is under threat. I do think that a vast number of companies that do not adjust their model and their offering, and a vast number of actual recruiters who bury their heads in the sand will, like dinosaurs, die out. You mentioned, and I will answer your question, but you mentioned candidates, and I'd like to just address that for a moment. You're right about candidates. If they ever had respect for our industry, it's long gone. Candidate care in our industry is farcical. It's not real, and in fact, the model of our industry is set up to annoy as many candidates as we can, it seems, because so many candidates not only get a job through us, but more importantly, they are belittled by the process, and there is a massive reservoir of resentment from candidates around the world about the entire recruitment process, and not only, by the way, recruiters, third-party recruiters, but also corporates, because in the GFC, a lot of people were applying for jobs. They were poorly treated. They didn't get good responses, and an apathy set in about our industry and about the recruitment process, a lack of belief in it. And at the same time that was happening, social media came along, which suddenly allowed candidates to connect with companies directly, and people of a younger bent who are very digitally savvy now, I believe, expect much faster response times. They expect transparency in the process. And, you know, I try to do that at Firebrand by putting, you know, each of our recruiters had a dedicated URL on our website. You didn't apply to the company, you applied to the individual. You could contact that person through any number of platforms. There was nowhere to hide. And I did that because I sensed, and I believe it to be true, and in fact it was borne out by the fact that the vast majority of applications that come into the Firebrand website come via the consultant page, not via the job board. And that proves to me that people want to deal with people. They want to be treated like people. This is not new what I'm saying, but there is no one out there that I have seen who is really addressing this issue of dealing with candidates in such a way that you build a brand based on your candidate service. And that's going to become critical, Shane, because, as I said before, everything about the future of recruitment that's scary is shortages of candidates. That's the irony of the modern working world, is that we have high unemployment and high vacancies. In America today, there's 9% unemployment, but there's 3.5 million vacant jobs. And the reason for that is that the skills that are available don't match the skills required because all these new jobs are being invented. And so that's good for our industry because it means there is a need for those who are professionals, finders of talent. But the thing that just shocks me is how few recruiters are addressing that issue. They are treating candidates worse. They are spending less time on sourcing tactics. Companies are not investing in sophisticated social media strategies, in good ATS and database systems. Of course, some are, and I know times are tight, but we really need to understand that the future of this industry that's going to make us viable is to be able to find candidates our clients can't. That is the only thing, and to do that we have to change our definition of candidates. There are still the majority of recruiters in this world, Shane, they define a candidate only when that person applies for a job. When that person applies for a job by sending in a resume, they might screen them, they might interview them, and at some point in that process they call them a candidate. That's old school. That's history. I mean, we can't wait for somebody to apply for a job. My view is that everyone is a candidate all the time. A great recruiter. We shouldn't even be talking about passive candidates and active candidates. Forget that. Everyone is active as long as we ignite them. And that's the skills new recruiters need to have, the ability to identify where candidates are, whether they are looking for a job now or not, engage with them, and seduce them. That's the word I use these days. People talk about talent identification and recruiting and sourcing. Seduction's the skill. Seduction in the sense of yeah, you got to identify a candidate, but then you have to seduce them to bring them into the pool of candidates that you can actually place. And I know people don't like these terms, but I don't really care. That is the accurate term. We have to be skilled at bringing the candidate to the client. And that is the craft of recruitment. So we need to change the definition of a candidate. Every single person, okay, of course, James Packer, multi-billionaire, he'd be pretty hard to headhunt, I'll give you that. But the vast majority of people, if presented with a compelling opportunity, will consider it. And if they don't consider it for today, it opens the door for a conversation for tomorrow or next year. And that's the kind of thinking we need to have. But most recruiters are not thinking that way. In this country, which is meant to be forward-thinking in terms of recruitment, most recruiters' default action is to run an ad on a job board. That is totally undifferentiated and will soon no longer work. So, we really need to rethink how we go about it, and the guiding light should be simply this. How can I create a company, or how can I create a brand and a process as an individual recruiter which allows me to access candidates prior to everyone else getting them, unique candidates, because that is what clients will pay us a lot of money for. Our fees will go up if we can do. In some of my markets that I was operating in, like Japan, our fees were going up. In a market of high unemployment, because we were recruiting in digital marketing, massive shortages of people, and I kid you not, I wrote a blog about this, a client paid us 65% fee, and it was the client's idea, because the client said, I want to incentivize you to find this person. Unsurprisingly, we did.
Well, that's probably one of the highest fees I've ever heard of. It was funny, you're just talking about a whole lot of stuff that I was doing, thanks to our mutual friend Bill Borman. I was at True Dublin last week. I was asked to talk about candidate experience, and before the event I put a tweet out which was slightly controversial saying, recruiters care about candidates the way butchers care about animal welfare. I got a slew of responses, all of whom were defending butchers. What does that tell you about the recruitment industry perception as to what the market is like?
Look, it's kind of macabre humor because it's a sad. But my favourite saying is that candidate care and recruitment is like inviting 100 people to a party at your house and then leaving 95 of them out in the rain. That's how we work in our industry. We upset a lot of people, and the secret to candidates, secret. I don't know if it's such a big word, but candidates will remember how you make them feel. They won't even remember, obviously they'll remember if you find them a job, but I've spoken to candidates who are viciously critical of a recruitment company who found them a job, but who still treated them poorly through the process. And yet I'm fully aware of a number of recruiters, some who've worked for me, some I've worked in competition with, who get tons of referrals and recommendations from candidates they don't place because they treated them with respect, they communicated through them with them throughout the process, they told the truth, and they told them the bad news, they gave them counseling, they gave them a shoulder to cry on, they gave them good advice, and that's what people will remember. So we have to create a recruitment company where we are able to do that. And unfortunately, one of the reasons we are not able to do that in many cases is because we're working in contingent job orders in competition. That's what actually drives bad. No recruiter comes to work thinking, how can I piss off my candidates today? Everyone, the vast majority, come in with good intentions, but they get swept away by competing with other recruiters on all their jobs. As a result, they fill one-fifth, if they're lucky, of the jobs that they handle. And so that's a massive amount of waste of time that would be better spent on doing quality recruitment or better spent on looking after candidates and nurturing them through the process. Something has to give, Shane, because that system will no longer work.
I would actually think your estimate of 1/5 of jobs is high. Most recruiters I deal with would be very happy to place that level. Most recruiters place less than 1% of the candidates that apply to them. Some of them as low as 0.1% of the candidates that apply to them. So the system is grossly inefficient. I know you've already mentioned lots of things in this area, but I've got to ask the question just to focus the discussion. What do recruiters have to do now to be successful now and in the future?
Well, I'll start with some generic things and then I'll go into some details. If I was starting a recruitment company tomorrow, and I'm not going to do that, I'm going to happily sit on the sidelines and watch the carnage unfold, I would hire people who were, first of all, digital natives. By that I mean comfortable with technology or open to learning it. So I'm 55 years old, hard to believe, I know you're thinking good-looking guy, but true, but I'm 55 years old, and yet I get invited to conferences to speak, not recruitment conferences, I get invited to those too, but I get invited to marketing conferences to speak on social media branding. How hilarious. I mean, I'm not exactly in the right generation, but the reason for that is I realized that I needed to understand that to be successful as a recruiter. And so I would hire people who have the same mindset, who are digital natives or want to understand digital, and by that I mean, in our industry, typically the ability to identify candidates via technology, but also social media, of course, and we'll talk more about that later. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think recruiters who have got networks and who can network and who have reach in their niches, and by the way, you're right about specialization, and I'll come to that, will be successful, or I should say that will be a requirement to be successful. And so if I was hiring a recruiter today, I'd look for networks and reach and an ability to connect with people. And the other things I'd look for...
Sorry, Greg, the recruiter of the future looks like quite a different type of person than the recruiter now, even though we want to get the best of the craft of recruitment imbued in the recruiter of the next 10 years.
Completely. I mean, I think that some recruiters who are good now will be able to evolve. So it's not as if it's either or. They will be able to, and some are evolving very successfully. And I like to think I've evolved in some ways, you know, obviously falling behind in many others, but evolved in some ways. So you're right. I mean, this digital, a lot of recruiters are in fact technophobes to this day. So that's right. And networking, a lot of recruiters are not effective at that at all. I also think recruiters have to be good writers. You know, content marketing is important. While I love people to pick up the telephone in terms of influencing, it's also true. I think you need to be able to blog, and I think you need to write a compelling tweet, and I think you need to be able to communicate through writing. I think you need to have deep knowledge in a niche, and I think because that gives you credibility with candidates and clients. And there's one other thing I think you have to have, which you'll find surprising. I'm going to use the word empathy. I think recruiters going forward need to be empathetic, which typically they're not. The day of the arrogant, showy, superficial, salesy, in the bad sense of the word, not the good sense, recruiter is long gone. We need to have empathy. And what I mean by that, somebody who can empathize with the plight of a job seeker, somebody who understands their hot buttons, somebody who understands how they want to be treated, you need to build a brand that, as an individual, that makes you a talent magnet going forward. And so empathy is important. So those are some of the things. As I said before, I think recruiters need to be working at that crossroads of where technology meets human interaction. So I think a recruiter in the future will understand that finding talent is step one, and we need to be really good at that through social media and technology and effective use of our database and, you know, Boolean searches and deep internet searches and the ability to find people, yes. But then the ability, which is important, can be outsourced to a degree. You can separate those skills from the second part of it, which is the seduction. Recruiters have to be brilliant at seduction. And by that I mean it's not the old-fashioned headhunter calling someone up cold and saying, "G'day, you know, you're looking for a new job. I've got some great opportunities, mate." You can't do that. The great talent out there, of which the talent shortages of the future are going to be far worse than anything we've seen in the past, in my view. In fact, I think that's happening right now. And I can tell you that we will have cataclysmic shortages of talent. And that's good for recruiters in a way, but only if you've got the skill to A, find it, and B, nurture it. So I think that's important. And then managing through the process is a skill that, as I said before, is lost. I'm a great believer that recruiters are going to need to be deeply specialized. You touched on that. That's not a new thing to say. I think you have to be very smart about your specialization. You don't want to take, you don't want to take a niche that's going to maybe disappear under your, be swept away from you. But I do think that the reason specialization is so important is obviously to have credibility with the clients, etc. But the more important thing, which most people don't recognize, is specialization gives you credibility with passive candidates, even though I banned the word passive, but with candidates. Because you think about it, you know, if you're going to have a brain operation, you want to go to the most specialized brain guy, not the guy who operates on arms and shoulders and knees. You want to go to the expert. And while that's, you know, a trite comparison compared to recruiting, it is true that if you have a reputation for being an expert in a niche, it will attract the best candidates to engage with you because they will feel that you can give them insights they can't get elsewhere. And
Greg,
these are the little advantages.
Sorry to cut across you, Greg. There's a bit of a time delay where we're at. Can I give a wonderful example of what you've just described?
Yes, please.
I've met this fantastic guru of recruitment a long time ago called Greg Savage, who you were at that stage, you were looking at the Accurate website, and you did something that I've held up as an example to lots of other recruiters to do, where you got rid of the job board, and whenever you went and searched the job, you came up with a face of the recruiter who was going to do the job, and it gave a bio of that recruiter saying how much experience they had working in that field and the type of companies they worked with, and the only way you could apply for the job was to connect with them on LinkedIn or contact them on Twitter or ring them up or connect with that person individually. So rather than showing a job board, you were showing a person, and it was a brilliant example of how you can demonstrate credibility. And as far as I know, and you can tell me if I'm completely wrong here, the result of doing that was fewer applications but a much improved quality of applicant.
That's exactly what happened, and it was, you know, it was quite in its time. And it's still like that on the APSCo website, by the way. I think they may have a job board back up there, but what we did at that time, which was quite courageous, I think, is we took our job board off the website. So if you were looking for a job on that website, you couldn't search as you can on every other recruiter website, I'm looking for a digital marketing job in Albuquerque or Sydney, and up would come some jobs. You searched for an expert in our company. And so you said, I am a graphic designer looking for a job in Adelaide, and you entered that, and up would come the person in our company in Adelaide that specialized in graphic design. And then you engaged with that person, and they would discuss jobs with you. Now, what it did is it cut down our job applications by about, going back a few years, by about 60%. But that was a good thing, because that was the 60% we were annoying by never getting back to anyway. Because we were getting, APSCo is a company with 50, 60 offices around the world, right? But we were getting, I can't remember the number, 100,000 applications a month. So it cut it down dramatically. I mean, suddenly we weren't annoying so many people. And we were getting a better quality of applicant. And, you know, the mantra that I sort of said, I've just forgotten, and you reminded me of it, I used to say at that time, kind of old hat now. I used to say job boards don't find people jobs, people find people jobs. So connect with a person in our company, not a job board. Now, you know, job boards is kind of old hat, but at the time job boards were the flavor of the month. And so we did away with job boards. And I do think that that's on the right track. You know, I think it was before its time. I don't even think it was my idea, but I did give it the go-ahead. You know, somebody else's idea. Somebody cleverer than me thought about it. It was a good thing to do. Very good thing to do.
Super. Well, Greg, just in summary then, I mean, the sort of stuff you're talking about, I haven't quite worked out whether you're optimistic about the future of the recruitment industry or not. I think you're a little bit in despair, as I have been over the years, at its inefficiency and it's in our desire to improve things. But it sounds as though the future is going to be developing the craft of recruitment, seducing candidates, getting your head around technology, and trying to provide value to your customers, clients, and candidates.
Yeah, I think sure. Look, I am optimistic about the future of recruitment. With the proviso that we reshape how we do business and what we offer clients, because I'm absolutely convinced they will not pay us for what they used to pay us for. So we've got to and what we've got to provide them, as I said, is talent they can't find themselves. That's obvious, but we've also got to deliver those talent and in a way that will get, you know, we've got to get talent to accept offers. So we've got to get the right talent and manage the process. There is one other point I'll make. I think that recruiters, you know, individuals, a lot of the stuff I've talked about, company owners have got to address, but individuals can do a lot by building a personal brand, and you can do that these days much more easily than you, both online and offline. And building a personal brand offline, you know, the simple way to do that is to just change your interaction with candidates. Your candidates will be your biggest advocates and your biggest critics by doing, you know, 5 or 6 simple things that we all know. Return phone calls, tell them the truth, respond. Just remember that they'll remember how you make them feel. And the way people want to feel in a job search is important, is cared about, is communicated with. So that's why you want less candidates. You want less and better candidates, and you want to treat them better. That will create an offline brand for you, which will snowball into referrals, recommendations, and repeat business. I promise you that. The second thing is to create an online brand. Every single recruiter who's listening to this should do 3 things. 2 of them you can do by tomorrow night, and the other one take a bit more work. 1, you should set up a profile on Twitter, a proper profile, not with a picture of you drinking a beer, not with a silly bio saying, I support Spurs. Who cares if you support Spurs? If you're using your Twitter profile for work, it needs to be professional, and you need to build a community of people who follow you. You know, now's not the time to run a seminar on Twitter, and I bet you've done it yourself. But there are so few recruiters on Twitter, and those that are, so few doing a good job. You know, I'm a good example. I mean, I've got 25,000 Twitter followers. I was giving a talk in New Zealand last October, and the organisers told me we got 150 spaces. Well, I tweeted it, and in 3 days we'd filled it without marketing it in any other way. Now, that's a community, you know, that you can do that. So, Twitter. Number 2, having said LinkedIn's not your friend, it is something to be used while it's there. So get a proper LinkedIn profile, a full LinkedIn profile. So few recruiters, well, let me rephrase that. So many recruiters have incomplete LinkedIn profiles with poor bios, poor summaries, not filled in their backgrounds. No client sees you these days without looking at your LinkedIn page. Why would you allow that to let you down? And the third thing you should do is blog. You should blog in your niche. And you should blog about subjects that are interesting to your clients and your candidates. And the 3 of those things operating in tandem, supported by your offline activities, will build you a brand, not immediately. You know, it's a long game, over a year or 2, but if you're serious about this, it'll build you a brand that will do a number of things for you. Give you credibility, lift your profile, bring you candidates, and it'll allow you, and this is an important point, it'll allow you to do business development with clients in the modern way. Old-fashioned, relentless cold calling is hopeless. It doesn't work, and you've got, all over this city and all cities around the world, you've got managers of recruitment companies bereft of any new ideas, beating up recruiters to make more cold calls, which basically means our industry is competing with each other to piss its clients off the most. It is ludicrous. So we've got to stop that, and we've got to understand that through, for example, Twitter, you can build up rapport and relationships with people, which can be morphed into offline meetings. So your business development can be done in a much more sophisticated way. If we had more time, we could talk about that in more detail. But this is what I think a recruiter of the future is like. You know, they're digital, they've got networks, they can influence, they've got the craft of recruitment, they understand persuading, negotiating, they understand the future's about talent, they have techniques to identify talent, but they also have soft skills to seduce them, and they can manage the process through to conclusion. Easy to say, hard to do, Shane.
Thank you very much, Greg. I mean, that's fantastic. You're pushing an open door whenever you're trying to persuade me of these ideas. Let's see if we can disseminate the ideas around the world and improve the industry for everybody. I'm just going to, we're sort of at the end of our time now, but I'm just going to very quickly put a screenshot up of our contact details again. And here we go. There we go. My Twitter handle is intelligence, spelled with a 1. Greg is, of course, at Gregs_Savage. Google Greg and have a look at the Savage Truth blog and subscribe to it. There's a subscribe button. And Greg, you're a prolific writer, so you're producing stuff every few days, if not every few weeks. And it's very, very well worth a read to get to understand that. You can also subscribe to my stuff as well if you're interested. My next webinar is happening on Thursday, July the 11th, and I'll be talking about location-based sourcing. I'm also going to give a quick shout out to my friend Catherine Robinson, who did a Facebook graph search webinar with me a little while ago. She's organising the Discover Sourcing event in London on the 18th of September, and I've been lucky enough to be asked to be a speaker at that, so looking forward to that as well. Thank you very much for your time today, Greg. That was absolutely fantastic to spend time talking to you. We ran over a little bit, but we could keep on talking a whole lot more if we had time to do so. Maybe some other time.
I enjoyed it, and I'm sorry I never gave you a chance to talk. But you know, that's the danger of speaking to me about recruitment.
I'm very happy just to sit and listen, Greg. We could do that for hours on end. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks everybody for taking part in this. This webinar will be up on my YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to that. Please share it. The whole thing about social, and we do these webinars, I don't make money out of it. We don't charge anybody. Please share it. Please disseminate Greg's ideas about recruitment, and together we'll create a better industry for everybody. Thanks very much for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. Send me some emails and give me some feedback on what you think, and I'll speak to everybody very soon. Thanks for